we had to turn to the federal government for help, to state government for help. I've stood in line for government cheese. I've stood in line for bread. And I knew at 11 years old that that was not America's best, that there was more for us. We didn't live that way in Florida. We didn't have to pay with monopoly money for groceries in the grocery store. And that's what we were doing in Colorado. My stepdad, he ended up getting work in Aspen when I was about 12, and we moved to the western slope of Colorado, and that really was the best thing that could have ever happened to us. We moved into a community that wasn't just telling us where to get a hand out, but they were offering a hand up.
Talking about the Californians coming.
Yes, and they're bringing their bad policies with them. And so there really is an urban and rural divide, and we want to keep rural Colorado rural. But unfortunately, in these high mountain ski resort towns that I represent, a lot of Californians can afford to move there, and they're bringing the same policies that they're fleeing from.
So I asked this to every conservative or Republican official that I talk to, like, when the people come, do you think they have no idea that they voted for those policies that they're now fleeing and realize that maybe they should think about things a little bit differently now?
No, I mean, because their actions would prove that.
Yeah.
They think they can flee from their problems, and unfortunately, there is a lower class of people who cannot afford to flee those bad policies that they have voted in and implemented, and so they get to leave, pack up, and go to somewhere with lower taxes and better opportunities and still have a beautiful scenic view. But there is another class that's left behind that cannot afford to make that same move, and they are the ones who are stuck in that terrible economy and a horrible state where they are left now to depend on the government to help in their situations, or even in these failing economies where taxes are just too high to afford the homes that they want to live in. So I mean, it's really impacts them more than anything. And then they come to these other states and bring those same policies. So I wouldn't think that they knew what impact they're having on these communities.
Yeah, the idea that they're leaving the people who can't afford to move is sort of interesting too. You know, I realized this morning when I was thinking about how I wanted to do this interview that, you know, if you take sort of the new crop of Congress people and you think about mostly the Democrat side, we all know everything about AOC. We know everything about Ilhan Omar, probably too much, more than we want to know. We know everything about Ayanna Pressley and the rest of the crew. But we don't actually know that much from a national perspective about you. And it's like, it seems like people should be talking about you just as much, but that's not really how the media operates, because you're a scary conservative.
Scary conservative. I should be the Democrats' dream story. I was raised a Democrat, and I was dependent on government, and I thought I always would be. Because when you're stuck in that cycle of poverty, it's really hard to break free of it.
Yeah, can you tell everyone your story a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in Orlando, Florida. My mom was single. We lived with her parents. My grandparents, I attribute a solid foundation to them and the few years that they had me in their home. But my mom just up and moved us to Colorado when I was 4 years old. She met a guy and moved to an apartment in Aurora, and I think her pride was too big to go back home to her parents. Things kind of got a little rough. He wasn't the Prince Charming that she thought he was going to be. But then eventually she had my first younger brother with him, and she didn't want to have another child not have a father. And so we were stuck. We were here through the good, the bad, and the very ugly. And that led us to times where he wasn't working, and we had to turn to the federal government for help, to state government for help. I've stood in line for government cheese. I've stood in line for bread, and I knew at 11 years old that that was not America's best, that there was more for us. We didn't live that way in Florida. We didn't have to pay with monopoly money for groceries in the grocery store, and that's what we were doing in Colorado. My stepdad, he ended up getting work in Aspen when I was about 12, and we moved to the western slope of Colorado, and that really was the best thing that could have ever happened to us. We moved into a community that wasn't just telling us where to get a hand out, but they were offering a hand up. And they started sharing with my mom conservative values. So she listened and even changed her voter registration to Republican, but she didn't vote Republican.
It's a process.
She got to the ballot box and said, "No, I'm scared. I'll lose everything if Republicans are in charge." We didn't have enough stability for her to let go of that mindset. And so I started working at 15 years old at the Rifle McDonald's, and I can still remember bringing mom home that first paycheck. I remember the dignity that had come with earning a paycheck, putting my hand to something and creating wealth. And that's something that never left me. I learned at a very young age that I could do a better job taking care of myself than the government ever had. So I began to develop these conservative principles, not even knowing what was happening. And my husband and I, we met when he moved to Colorado to work in the oil and gas industry. And, you know, we knew that we could build a great life together, a successful life together. I had only ever wanted to be a mom. I didn't have dreams to be a business owner, to be a doctor or a lawyer, certainly not a politician. I just wanted to be a mom. My mom was my hero and someone that I looked up to. And so when we started our life together, we wanted to start our family right away. And that left me with a very difficult decision to make my senior year of high school, because now I have a child and a family, and I didn't want to go back to the bread lines. I didn't want government cheese for my boy. And so I quit high school, and I took a management position with McDonald's that was very good for my age, and that was more valuable.
Wait, they took you into a management position after quitting high school just like that?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
No degree necessary.
Wow. Wow.
Yes. Well, it was really, it was the hours that I needed to work for that shift manager position of why I needed to quit high school. I was working nights with them, and they said, to be a shift manager, we need you in this day shift. And so I had to leave high school to take on that role. And for me, there was more value in earning that paycheck for my family than sitting in geography class for another 2 months until I graduate high school.
Do you remember what you were making per hour at that point?
45 a year.
45 a year.
45,000 a year.
Yeah.
And
that's once you were in the management position. But
yes.
Do you remember what you were making per hour at McDonald's?
About $7.50. So there was several different pay periods that I had with them. I started out, I think at $6.15 an hour, and then I was about $7.50 an hour, and then I went to a salaried position.
How much of that shapes your economics, the way you think about it now? Because, you know, to be a good person, I thought we have to have everyone making, or the lowest people have to make $15. That means you're a good moral person. If you scream that, should you have been making $15 an hour then?
No, I worked for every extra dollar that I did earn. And it really gave me an opportunity that I wouldn't have had if minimum wage was $15. Look at how many things are automated now. Now that we're reaching $15 per hour, McDonald's has kiosks instead of the 15, 16, 17-year-old high school student that was coming in and earning a paycheck. And so I would not have had the opportunities that have shaped my worldview, my economic view, had minimum wage been so high, because they would not have been able to afford to invest in me and provide that opportunity for me to have a work ethic and develop my life skills.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.